I had women calling me, crying, saying, Sara, I heard from another Afghan source, a friend of mine, that you're helping get people out. I'm an American citizen. I'm here with my husband, and the State Department won't let me out. And they were like devastated, crying. I said, hold on a minute. Let me call someone. Let me try to find somebody to put you in touch with. I had people calling me all night, even up to the point of Abbey Gate, where we got a girl out from Kabul University, and within 15 minutes, the gate blew up. This month will mark the 2-year anniversary of Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Even the State Department, a review done by the State Department, actually put partial blame on President Biden. I believe the full blame is on President Biden, as well as the State Department's decisions made 2 years ago, in which so many young Marines lost their lives, so many people were wounded at Abbey Gate, and which, by the way, opened the door for China, Islamic State terrorists, Russians, and everybody else to operate on our planet with impunity. You know, at the time of that disastrous withdrawal, it was like my husband and I got kicked in the stomach, especially for my husband, you know, who spent the majority of his life, in fact, 20 years of his life since 2001, back and forth in that godforsaken region until he eventually, the last battle, which he did win, but he ended up losing his eyesight completely. And I don't know if that was really a win. I mean, is it ever a win? I guess it was in the end for him, you know, but for Americans overall, and even for my husband, when President Biden decided to just withdraw out of the nation in such a haphazard way, in which he turned over Kabul, the capital, to the Taliban and to the terrorists, for that matter, even they were surprised when he did this. Even they were stunned and, you know, making calls and saying this can't be real, and, you know, that there's no way that they would have let, you know, the United States of America would have let them do this. And they did, to the point where China and Russia laughed at us after 20 years and use it now as propaganda against the United States, where we can't even find people that were willing to cooperate with us because we look like, and we did, desert our allies. There were better ways of getting out of Afghanistan. All of that culminated in such a disaster for us and for the rest of the world. And the Biden administration should be blamed. In fact, I believed President Biden should have been impeached for his actions. Impeached for his actions that led to the loss of 13 service members, 11 Marines, 1 Army soldier, 1 Navy sailor, all killed at Abbey Gate, including all the others that were civilians there at the gate waiting. And I remember that day vividly because it was 15 minutes or so after I had got someone through Abbey Gate, given them directions on the phone to meet a source that was at Abbey Gate, that led them through Abbey Gate onto the airfield. A young Afghan girl who was married to an American citizen here that was trapped at the University of Kabul. And I think, like everyone, I was in a complete state of shock when the gate blew. I knew something bad was going to happen, but we just didn't know what it was, right? At that moment. Well, the whole thing was bad. Remember people hanging off the Air Force C-17, that plane that was taking off, and so many people just holding on, falling from the sky, like something we had never seen before, right? The horrors of war, but more so, the horror of the decision that was made that altered and changed our world inevitably. Since for the last 2 years, our adversaries have been operating off that moment. I want you to just think about that. Our adversaries have been operating off that decision made by the worst president, in my opinion, in United States history, President Joe Biden. And today I'm joined by a journalist and an investigator who I have so much respect for. He has worked tirelessly to uncover the truth about what really happened during that withdrawal. It's Jerry Dunleavy, and he's going to go through in detail what his book has uncovered. And you are not going to want to miss this. His new book, Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought Until the Bitter End. And folks, you are not going to want to miss this interview. But first, I need to thank Allegiance Gold. Thank you so much, Allegiance Gold, for giving people the option to diversify, so not that all their money is just stuck in one place. And what do I say all the time? In days like this, where everything is just unknown, where we don't know what the next event will be, where we see our stock market flailing, where the Chinese are getting more and more emboldened, where at any moment right now, China could be invading Taiwan. It could affect the entire global system. You need to diversify, and you can do that with Allegiance Gold. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Right now, you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry. 5 stars with TrustLink. It's AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, folks. You do not want to end up like the people did in Canada, where the banks were being seized by the government, by, Trudeau, the Marxist, or you don't want that happening here in the United States by our woke corporations who just randomly, willy-nilly kick you out whenever they feel like it. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, or go to protectwithsara.com. So happy to have you on, Jerry Dunleavy. You're an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congratulations. I think that they are blessed to have you. You're a former Department of Justice investigative reporter for the Washington Examiner. That's incredible, because I was too for a long time. I had a column at the Washington Examiner. And you are the author of this incredible book, which is so close to my heart, Kabul, The Untold Story of Biden's Fiasco and the American Warriors Who Fought Till the End. That actually makes me want to cry. So thank you so much for being on the Sara Carter Show.
Well, thank you so much, Sara, for having me. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the work you do.
Oh, you're welcome. And I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate your work. And I know when my husband, Marty, listens to this podcast, it's really going to touch his heart. And I need to ask you this. Do you have the book on Audible yet? Is the book on Audible? So I'm going to get that for him if it's on Audible yet. If it's not, we're going to get it there.
Yep. People can get Kabul wherever books are sold. You can get on Amazon, bookstores, and we've got the audio version as well. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to make sure that Marty listens to this book as soon as he hears the podcast with you. So you got your marching orders, babe. As soon as you hear this. You use the word fiasco in the title of your book. I love that word. Why is that the best way? And I have my own reasons for believing that is the best word, but why is that the best way to describe our withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Yeah. I mean, the main thrust of our book is that pretty much everything that happened in 2021 did not have to happen the way that it did. President Biden's withdrawal decision, and it was President Biden's withdrawal decision, by the way, because I think a lot of questions get raised about President Biden's age, whether he's in control of everything that's happening at the White House. And I think oftentimes those questions are probably pretty fair. But when it came to Afghanistan and this decision and this debacle, this was President Biden, start to finish. This was him. This is what he wanted. This is what he ordered. He could not be dissuaded. He would not listen to anyone who had any countervailing opinions. This was him. And so it's a fiasco because President Biden's withdrawal decision, his unconditional withdrawal, someone consider it an unconditional surrender, meant that the U.S. military was gone in extremely rapid fashion. April 14th is when he made his decision, and July 2nd, we had closed every base that we controlled, and we closed Bagram. And U.S. troops were essentially gone from the country, outside of a small force that the Biden administration ridiculously thought would somehow be able to maintain an embassy, hold an airport, and keep things going for us. It was lunacy. And pulling U.S. troops meant not just that U.S. troops were gone, but that advisors were gone, logistics was gone, ISR was gone, contractors gone. All the things that we, the United States, had built the Afghan military around, all the things that the Afghan military was designed to function based off of. And so we pulled all of those things essentially immediately. And so what that meant was an already weak and shaky Afghan military is now without any of the things that it's been designed around. We pulled all of them. And so the Taliban just takes over in rapid fashion. And
isn't it true, Jerry? Isn't it true?
Yeah.
Isn't it true? And I heard this from very reliable sources that the Taliban leadership at the time was stunned that it was so easy that they even walked into Kabul and they were like, did they just hand over Kabul to us? Was it just that easy? Not only did they hand over Kabul, but they also handed over, remember, the lists of Americans and Afghan sources and aides that assisted us while we were in Afghanistan, just basically gave them the roll call list of everybody who helped us, and that put everybody in danger and everybody was in hiding. I mean, this was beyond
absolutely
a fiasco. I mean, it was a fiasco. It was exactly what you said. It's a fiasco because we knew when we did that we were putting everybody's life in jeopardy. How did they not?
Keep in mind that when Biden was doing all of these things that led to a predictable disaster, there was never a plan about how are we going to keep the Afghan military fighting to keep the Taliban at bay. What are we going to do about the tens of thousands of Afghan allies that we had made promises to? There was no plan for them. What are we going to do about the thousands of Americans that are stuck in Afghanistan? There was no plan for them. And so Biden made all these decisions. The Taliban takes over in rapid fashion, and we have thousands and thousands of people now behind Taliban lines. And yeah, the Taliban did pretty much walk right into Kabul because we had debilitated an already weak Afghan military, and we had pulled every single piece of U.S. force out of the country. And so our ability then to stop the Taliban on its march across the country was essentially non-existent. And keep in mind that as this is happening, as the Taliban is clearly on the verge of taking Afghanistan, is knocking on the door of Kabul, President Biden's on vacation. Secretary Blinken is on vacation. Jen Psaki's on vacation. And when I say that they're on vacation, I don't mean that like metaphorically, although they were metaphorically on vacation throughout all of 2021 as well. I also mean literally. Like they were so blind to what was happening in Afghanistan that Blinken is in the Hamptons, Biden's on vacation, Psaki's on a pre-planned vacation. There's the White House is rudderless as the Taliban takes over and takes Kabul.
All of this, Jerry, all of this.
Yeah.
Well, and I have a lot of listeners who are part of the military, some of them special operators. Hey, Nasty, I know you're listening to this. You're out in Montana. A lot of special ops guys who we've known throughout our lives because of my husband's work. All of this, while men and women have given their lives, their limbs, their families, their precious time, everything about their life, the last 20 years, the longest war, just no respect at all for even the soldiers and troops, Marines, Navy, Army, whose blood was spilt on that land thousands of miles away from home, where their last breath was in some of the most roughest terrain on earth, fighting an enemy that they believed they were, and they knew they were protecting the United States against. I just want everybody to understand that while Jerry is talking about this, while they're on vacation, just enjoying life in the Hamptons, it's the regular American citizens, the young people, the people that have dedicated their life to protecting this nation that have lost their lives there. That's
Absolutely.
just to show you what kind of president we have in the White House.
Absolutely. And, the book Kabul, we dedicate it to the 13 American service members who lost their lives at Abbey Gate, but also to the other 2,448 Americans who lost their lives in Afghanistan as well. And, just think about this, that President Biden, he when he made his withdrawal speech, he picked the 20th anniversary of 9/11 to be the date when the final U.S. troops would be gone. And I think that this was such a bizarre decision, clearly political. I think he thought he would get some sort of victory lap out of this. But I think to your average American, I think especially the ones who served over in Afghanistan for 20 years, picking the 20th anniversary of 9/11 was insane. The Taliban were the ones that harbored al-Qaeda when they were attacking us in the 90s, when they attacked us on 9/11, and the Taliban was willing to spend 20 years out in the hinterlands fighting rather than break that alliance with al-Qaeda. And so President Biden making that decision, it was not just insane for that reason, but it was also a decision that meant that all U.S. troops were being pulled right in the middle of Afghan fighting season, which, as anyone that served over in Afghanistan over the last 20 years knows, that the spring and the summer is when fighting is intense. The snow melts and fighting can actually commence. And the spring and the summer is when it is the worst. And we pulled our troops out and our advisors and our contractors and everything that the Afghan military needed to keep fighting at the exact moment that the Afghan fighting season was ramping up and the Taliban was on the march. And so by Biden making the decision for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, not only I think was that a punch in the gut for everyone that had served over there, and I think for any Americans who remember 9/11, but it also ensured that on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the Taliban, al-Qaeda's partners, were back in charge of Afghanistan 20 years after those terrible attacks.
They were there. Jerry, they're there. Because I talked to sources, even before we pulled out, they were already building up in the villages in southern Afghanistan. And it was interesting. I was listening to you talk about how they're, the spring and the summer, and you're absolutely right. I was just looking actually at an old folder of mine, ISAF folder, with my letters in there for deployment as a journalist to be embedded with striker brigades in southern Afghanistan or Helmand province. And it was always in the spring and the summer when towards, and sometimes even in the fall, I would go when we would hear that the troops were getting ready for a heavier fight. And I was reading that letter, and it just, it's things that I keep, as part of my memoirs, whatever. But it said, you're coming to Afghanistan. We need your blood type. We need, these are all the little stats that we're going to need from you. You're coming during the fighting season, and spring it will intensify. You'll be with this striker brigade in this part of Afghanistan. And I remember being on the ground there, and every time a young soldier lost their life or somebody was wounded and I was out there, by the grace of God, I don't know how, I was not one of them. So many of my colleagues were either killed or wounded. I think there was only very few of us that weren't physically wounded, but we were mentally wounded. We watched these horrors happen over and over again. I'm going to bring something up because I'm not trying to pit one president against another, but I do have something I want to ask you. I spoke to President Trump while he was in office about Afghanistan. He actually asked me about Afghanistan. He was talking about wanting to withdraw himself from this war and bring it to an end. But he said, I asked the Pentagon. He'd asked the Pentagon over and over again for a plan. Give me a plan. Give me a plan. Show me how we either win this or how we can draw down and still maintain control over the region. That's all he wanted. He never got it from them. They were always slow rolling everything with him. We could have done this differently. talking to, you have the sources. I mean, we could have found a way to hold Bagram so that the Chinese Communist Party isn't, who is controlling it now, I believe, and stop Al Qaeda and find a way to protect what we fought so hard for. Why do you think this administration didn't do that? Do you think they just didn't care?
Look, just bluntly, I just don't think that President Biden cared. This is who he is. We talk in the book about Biden trying to make his mark as a young senator. One of the first ways that he did it, he joined the Senate a little bit too late to be a big part of the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War, but he was there right at the end of the war. And what he tried to do is, as the North Vietnamese were marching towards South Vietnam to take Saigon, President Ford, sort of one of his last acts in Vietnam was to try to rescue and get out as many of the South Vietnamese allies that had fought alongside us as he could. And President Biden, then a senator, tried to make his mark by being the most vocal voice in America opposing efforts to get South Vietnamese allies out. He said, we don't have a moral, this is a quote, we don't have a moral obligation to 100,001. We don't have a moral obligation to one South Vietnamese. This is what he said. And this is just, I think, his mentality is he doesn't care. He especially doesn't care, I think, about the allies that the United States fights alongside. And you could see that in spades with the way that we had no plan about getting these Afghan allies out as we essentially abandoned the country to the Taliban. Tens of thousands of them just left behind. And so this is just, I think, who President Biden is. And we do, and I encourage everyone to read the book because I think we get inside his head pretty well to make that case.
Before I go on to all the great Americans, you included all the private citizens who helped rescue our allies in Afghanistan. I want to talk to you a little bit about and get like your assessment on how you feel this decision made by the Biden administration affected foreign policy across the globe. Because I think once we caved into the Taliban, once we saw what happened, I mean, because I blame President Biden for the 13 Marines that were killed directly, because they handed security over to the bad guys. There's just no other way to say it. In layman's terms, it's like, giving the bank to the bank robber. It's giving the city to the terrorists. So he basically made the decision that our Marines, their lives were not worth it at that moment. They didn't even think about it. They were on vacation, right? So how do you think this affected the decision for Russia to invade Ukraine, for North Korea to embolden itself, for Iran? Do you think it had an effect?
Absolutely. And I'm going to get to that in 1 second. But what you said there is really important. We, in Afghanistan, we handed over security to the Taliban. We were relying on the Taliban to get Americans and Afghan allies out because the Taliban controlled the entire country and all we had was this tiny little airport. And when it comes to the attack at Abbey Gate, let me just point this fact out that I think maybe most people don't know. So the decision to abandon Bagram was a terrible decision in so many different ways because Bagram would have been a much safer place to do an evacuation from. You never would have seen the chaos that you saw at the gates if we were doing this through Bagram. Maintaining Bagram and maintaining U.S. air assets there very well could have stopped the Taliban from ever being able to get close to Kabul because of the strategic position that Bagram had. On top of this, Bagram had prisons at the Air Force Base that contained thousands of members of ISIS-K, dozens of members of Al-Qaeda, thousands of Taliban prisoners. All of them were still there when we abandoned Bagram in July 2021. Among those ISIS-K prisoners was a man by the name of Abdul Rahman al-Lagri, who most Americans don't know his name because President Biden and the Biden administration won't even admit that this is who it is. But he is the ISIS-K terrorist who carried out the Abbey Gate attack. If we had simply maintained Bagram, which would have been important for so many different reasons, including getting Americans and Afghan allies out, and keeping the Taliban at bay. But if we had just maintained Bagram, the bomber who killed those 13 Americans would have just been sitting behind bars still, rather than being freed by the Taliban, who we then counted on for security, bizarrely. But he would have just been sitting behind bars rather than being able to attack Americans. And what I would say in terms of the effects that this had on the rest of the world, what happened in Afghanistan didn't stay localized, unfortunately. It's obviously terrible for Afghanistan and the country, for everyone that fought there. It's terrible when we look at the potential for terrorism now to emanate from there. But we have 2 chapters in our book, one on Russia and one on China, right at the end of the book. And we make a very strong case when it comes to Russia that Vladimir Putin, I think, had wanted to invade Ukraine, do a full-scale invasion for a long time. But the way that NATO and the United States clearly looked like they were in a total shambles, complete disarray, this was the moment that he said, this is as good as it's going to get for me. This is my moment to do it. And he did it. And so we're still dealing with that. When it comes to China, we have an entire chapter on this. The chapter is called The CCP and the Kabul Moment. The Kabul moment is what China called this Afghanistan debacle. And, China was sidling up to the Taliban for years. And especially in 2021, they saw the writing on the wall after Biden made his decision. They knew, okay, the Taliban's going to be in charge. When the Taliban took over, the Chinese Communist Party called this the Kabul moment. And they used this as propaganda to target Taiwan, basically saying, look at Afghanistan, look at what the United States did. 20 years of war, and this is how they're willing to end it. Look at what the United States is doing when it comes to the allies that fought alongside them. We're just leaving them behind, even leaving Americans behind. And a similar fate awaits you, Taiwan, if you try to fight when we invade. You can't count on the United States because this is what the United States does. This was China's propaganda. And when we titled that chapter, The CCP and the Kabul Moment, I wondered, well, how long is China going to continue to use this Kabul moment thing, Well, lo and behold, the book comes out around the second anniversary of the Taliban takeover, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry is back to just hammering away again at the Kabul moment. This is something that they've adopted. This is part of now the Chinese Communist Party's, propaganda toolkit now that they use to target our alliances around the world, but especially Taiwan, as they prepare, I think, to try to invade. And so what happened in Afghanistan didn't stay in Afghanistan, and we're dealing with a much more dangerous world. Now we have a major war on the European continent, and we have China getting ready to invade Taiwan. And
we have China at our doorstep. Jerry, we have China at our doorstep.
Yes.
Saber rattling right off the coast of Alaska, flying its balloons and its intelligence collection right over our nation. Our president is out to lunch somewhere or on vacation with the rest of his cronies. And, and by the way, in my opinion, and I know many of you out there who are listening to us right now know what my opinion is on this, but they have taken money from our adversaries like China and others and pocketed that money. And Congress is exposing that right now. And we see that not only with Hunter Biden, but with his father. We are in a huge predicament. And you brought up so important this Kabul moment, because for so long, and me working as a foreign correspondent overseas with a lot of foreign sources as well, one of the things that I would hear, and I heard it in Pakistan a lot, is like, well, there's so many people here that would probably want to assist the United States, but they're terrified. Because if they go to the CIA with information or they go to somebody, are they going to be abandoned? Are they going to be neglected? I mean, how you treat other people that are helping you and assisting you is the way that you are going to grow your HUMIT programs on the ground. You're not going to be able to get collectors. You're not going to be able to get agents. So you guys out there understand, an agent is somebody that the United States recruits. An officer is somebody that works actually for the agency. I'm just going to clarify that. So it's never really a CIA agent unless it's a foreign asset. So if you have a foreign person that is going to be working for you, they want to know that they're going to be able to get the hell out of Dodge when the US promised them. If I'm sneaking out the Warsaw Pact, I don't want to be like left staring at, Vladimir, at the last moment. I want to know that me and my family are going to make it out, right? So now nobody trusts us.
Well, look, we left tens of thousands of people behind that we had made promises to. And the number of people that we got out was impressive. And it was solely because of the incredible work by the U.S. troops on the ground. I mean, the position that Biden put them in was an impossible position with the Taliban outside the gates. We have a quote in the book about how one Haqqani Taliban commander bragged about surrounding the airport with 1,000 suicide bombers. And these Marines having to deal with watching the Taliban beating people, killing Afghans in front of us, the massive crowds. So look, the numbers were impressive, but when you dive down into the numbers, you see percentage-wise what a small number percentage-wise were actually the Afghan special immigrant visas, interpreters, the other people that worked alongside us. So many of them were left behind because there was no plan to get them out. And,
they
that's
lied to all of us, Jerry. They lied to all of us. I had people on the phone with me in tears. I had women calling me, crying, saying, Sara, I heard from another Afghan source, a friend of mine, that you're helping get people out. I'm an American citizen. I'm here with my husband and the State Department won't let me out. And they were like devastated, crying. I said, hold on a minute. Let me call someone. Let me try to find somebody to put you in touch with. I had people calling me all night, even up to the point of Abbey Gate, where we got a girl out from Kabul University. And within 15 minutes, the gate blew up. I mean, I got to ask you this question because this is about Abbey Gate. And I want to know if you know anything about this. There's been testimony before Congress that service members saw the terrorists coming to Abbey Gate, but they were ordered not to fire. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah. So Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews testified in front of Congress that he and his Marine snipers had been receiving intelligence in the lead up to the attack. Detailed intelligence about the attack coming, likely targeting Abbey Gate. Even people on the ground receiving intelligence about the specific timing of when it was going to come. And the timing wasn't far off because it was supposed to be that afternoon, and that is when it happened. Also, Tyler Vargas Andrews and his Marines receiving descriptions of the suspected bomber himself. And Tyler and his team believe that they spotted the likely suicide bomber in the crowd. And he had an Army PSYOPs team come and look as well through the scope, see this guy fits the description. Everybody in agreement. They asked their commanding officer, who is Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whited, who, by the way, the committee that I'm currently working for is calling to come in to talk to us about all of this. They asked their commanding officer for permission to take the shot. And the commanding officer told them that he didn't have permission to give them permission to take the shot and that he didn't know who did. So the bomber disappears into the crowd and then the bomb goes off. And actually, Tyler was grievously wounded in that attack. Actually lost two of his limbs, an arm and a leg, in that attack. But in the course of writing our book, we also found other potential opportunities to hit ISIS-K before the Abbey Gate bombing. One officer told the Pentagon during the investigation to Abbey Gate that U.S. intelligence knew that ISIS-K was staging in a hotel about 1.5 miles west of Kabul airport, and that the U.S. military leadership asked the Taliban to conduct an assault on that location. But of course, obviously, the Taliban never did. And then there's other testimony in the course of the Pentagon's investigation into that botched airstrike, where officers said that they had requested to conduct a strike against an ISIS location in Afghanistan before the Abbey Gate bombing. And I, by the way, think that the location was likely the location in Nangarhar that we didn't strike until the day after the Abbey Gate bombing. But they requested permission to conduct a strike in Afghanistan against ISIS-K before the Abbey Gate bombing. But according to one officer, Vasley and Donahue, who were the two highest-ranking military officials on the ground, deemed that such a strike would be infeasible due to a negative response from the Taliban. And so you see here the position that we're in, where we're relying on the Taliban and perhaps giving some sort of veto to the Taliban over what we're able to do. And and then you've got Tyler asking for permission to take the shot and not getting permission to take it. And then just the simple fact of the prisoner, the ISIS-K bomber being in Bagram, us abandoning it, and then the businesslike and professional Taliban, as they called them, immediately freeing these ISIS-K members to immediately go out and plot an attack against the United States and successfully carry one out. And so all of that put together, I think, shows that a lot more could have been done to stop this attack from happening. And a lot of it goes back to abandoning Bagram and putting us in a position where we're relying on the Taliban.
I know that there's so many out there of you who are listening to this, like me right now, just saying to yourself, who have family members who are in the military or working in the intelligence community, and thinking to yourself, like, all the sacrifices that they make, everything that they do, the one thing that you as a family member or as a service member would think of is, well, you know what? At least my country has my back. At least my nation has my back. But what we're seeing over and over again is that that's not the case. It shouldn't be this way. And especially when it came to what happened at Abbey Gate, where 13 servicemen, and by the way, a lot of American citizens, because a lot of the Afghans that were in that line when, the bomber went through and blew up the gate, they lost their lives too. Children, and the devastation of a bomb like that, just the carnage and the visuals, like we're just thinking in numbers. We're not thinking about what that looks like. And I was there, Jerry, when the bomb went off in 2010 in front of the embassy, the Indian embassy in Kabul. And it was just an unbelievable sight that is ingrained in my memory. Like I cannot get it out. Like people just disappeared into ashes. Other people were melted into the streets. There were arms and limbs everywhere. Children were being, with limbs hanging off of them, were being run down the street by men in their arms. It was just like, it was just the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. And I'm imagining that's what Abbey Gate looked like. But this is the, and I only have a few more questions because I'm going to bring you back because we have to talk about this. Yeah. We got to keep this going. Who is going to pay a price for this? This is what every single American asks me when I'm at an airport or I'm on assignment. They say to me, Sara, you and John Solomon uncovered this. Look, Jerry Dunleavy, he uncovered all of that. All these truths that have destroyed part of our nation or have led to the loss of life or fractured our foundation, who pays the price for this?
Yeah. Well, look, there has been no accountability, as we all know. Zero. After 20 years of war, the Taliban back in charge, 2,400 Americans lost their lives during the war, 13 Americans killed at Abbey Gate, third deadliest day for America throughout the entire 20-year war. And no accountability. No one fired. No one resigned. No political costs that I can see outside of, I think, President Biden's approval rating sort of taking a hit that it's never really recovered from. But outside of that, no real accountability. And so, part of writing the book, I think that accountability starts with getting the truth out there about what happened. It's tough to get accountability when people don't even know the real story.
Right.
And so we lay out in the book the people that we think need to be held accountable. And that starts with President Biden, but that includes Secretary Blinken and the State Department, I think more than anyone else. But it also includes Secretary Austin, General Milley, and the rest, because they all played their part. And even though it was ultimately President Biden's decision, there were, even within that, there were so many different mistakes made every step of the way that led to this. So that's where accountability starts, I think, with getting to the truth. And that's what our book does. But there's a lot more to be done. And I'm just speaking in my personal capacity as the book author here, but I will say that the House Foreign Affairs Committee investigation into all of this is very serious and is very determined not just to uncover the truth, but to get accountability as well.
Well, I'm going to be there right by your side, Jerry. I promise you I will help spread the word and hold these people accountable for what they did and the decisions that they made that led to the loss of life of so many wonderful Americans. And basically that decision itself is threatening the lives of so many people globally, because I believe it emboldened our enemies to act and to continue to act with impunity, because they know they can get away with this because our government under the Biden administration is failing to do their job. And I don't think we'd be in the position that we were in today if they had made the right decision in Kabul. Where can our listeners get your book? And please give us your social media. I want everything so everybody can follow you and keep up to date. And by the way, I think the GOP needs to listen to this. I think this needs to be a commercial, a policy commercial for the next presidential for the presidential election coming up in 2024. I think that we need to point out that this failure has a domino effect on foreign policy, and it is affecting us, and we need somebody else in the White House. So where can my listeners follow you, one, and get your book, two?
Yeah, and I totally agree that this has to be at the forefront. President Biden has skated on this, and Democrats controlled Congress for a year and a half, and so there was no tough questions asked of him, no investigations related to this. But this was bad for Afghanistan, this was bad for America, and this was bad for the world. And we're gonna pay the price for it for a long time. In terms of where you can buy the book, you can buy it anywhere books are sold. It should be in bookstores everywhere. Get it on Amazon, of course, as well. And you can get the audio version as well if you'd like. And you can get the e-version, whatever works for you. If you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter, Jerry Dunleavy. Very simple. Follow me there. And I'm constantly sharing details from the book and updates from the House Foreign Affairs Committee's investigation to Afghanistan as well. So you can follow me there for all of that.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you so much for being part of the Sara Carter Show. I know everybody out there, you're listening to Jerry right now, a real American hero, a real true patriot, somebody who's looking for the truth, searching for the truth, and somebody who's going to help us hold those accountable who failed us and failed our families in America's longest war. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Thanks for having me, and keep up all the great work you do.
If you love today's show and want even more of the Sara Carter Show, make sure you rate this podcast 5 stars and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. I don't care if that's Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official and on X at Sara Carter DC. Thank you, Elon Musk, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless all of our troops, and God bless the great state of Texas.